Shri Bhagavan Vacha Devanam Gunalinganam Anushravika Karmanam Sattva Ekaika Manaso Vritti Svabhaviki Tuya Animita Bhagavati Bhakti Siddher Gariyasi
Shri Bhagavan Vacha
Devanam Gunalinganam Anushravika Karmanam Sattva Eka Manaso Vritti Svabhavaki Tuya Animita Bhagavati
Bhakti Siddher Gariyasi
Bhakti Siddher Gariyasi
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha
Shri Bhagavan Vacha
Devanam Gunalinganam
Devanam Gunalinganam
Anusravika Karmanam
Anushravika Karmanam
Sattva Vika Manaso
Sattva Ekaika Manaso Vritti Svabhavaki Tuya
Animita
Bhagavati
Bhakti Siddhir Gatiyas
Bhaktir Siddhir Gariyasi. Ladies, can you see it?
No.
No?
These eyes are not that good.
Huh? Okay, we'll just go on. Translation. Lord Kapila said, the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods, and their natural inclination is to work under the direction of Vedic conjunctions. As the senses are representatives of the demigods, so the mind is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mind's natural duty is to serve. When that service spirit is engaged in devotional service to the Personality of Godhead without any motive, that is far better even than salvation. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The senses of the living entity are always engaged in some occupation, either in activities prescribed in the injunctions of the Vedas or in material activities. The natural inclination of the senses is to work for something, and the mind is the center of the senses. The mind is actually the leader of the senses, therefore it is called sattva. Similarly, the leader of all the demigods who are engaged in the activities of this material world, the sun god, moon god, Indra, and others, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic literature that the demigods are different limbs of the universal body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Our senses are also controlled by different demigods, semicolon. Our senses are representations of various demigods, and the mind is the representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The senses, led by the mind, act under the influence of the demigods. When the service is ultimately aimed at the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the senses are in their natural position. The Lord is called ISKCON, for he is actually the proprietor and ultimate master of the senses. The senses and the mind are naturally inclined to work, but when they are materially contaminated, they work for some material benefit or for the service of the demigods, although actually they are meant to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The senses are called Rishika, and the Supreme Personality of God is ISKCON. indirectly all the senses are naturally inclined to serve the Supreme Lord. That is called bhakti. Paragraph. Kapila Dev said that when the senses without desire for material profit or other selfish motives are engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in devotional service. That spirit of service is far better than siddhi or salvation. Bhakti, the inclination to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is in a transcendental position far better than mukti or liberation. Thus, bhakti is the stage after liberation. Unless one is liberated, one cannot engage the senses in the service of the Lord. When the senses are engaged, either in material activities of sense gratification or in the activities of Vedic conjunctions, there is some motive. But when the same senses are engaged in the service of the Lord and there is no motive, that is called animitta. Animitta, and is the natural inclination of the mind. The conclusion is that when the mind, without being deviated either by Vedic conjunctions or by material activities, is fully engaged in Krishna consciousness or devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is far better than the most aspired for liberation from material entanglement. So going back, I picked this verse because it's in a sequence that I've been following. Beginning of this chapter 25, quick summary, is Devahuti is lamenting. That she's lamenting, she's been with her husband for tens of thousands of years, serving him faithfully. And after some time, knowing that she, as well as he, also desired a son, he made an arrangements so they could have a son. First, they went from the forest, and he, by his mystic power, created this vimana that was as big as a city, and it could fly around the universe, and he gave her on a little tour of the universe. And then returning, so the big life change, returning, they had 9 daughters, and then she was pregnant with a son. The 9 daughters, Lord Brahma came because Kardama was engaged in the Prajapati program because Brahma asked him to assist. So Brahma came, said, well done. These 9 daughters, please give them in charity to others who, together with these 9 daughters, they'll produce praja to help fill up the universe. Well done, well done. And Devahuti, you're pregnant with a child. That child will be a boy, and the boy is an incarnation of the personality of God. It says, take good care of him. The son was born. When the son grew up, as was promised to the father of Devahuti, when the son is of age, Kardama, your condition to marry was, when the son is grown up, I'll leave and go to the forest again, continue meditation. That's what he did. So she's alone, except for her son. So that's prior to chapter 25. Beginning of chapter 25, Devahuti says to Kapila, oh, I'm feeling so much pain of separation from my husband because of undue material attachment. And I know that after some time you're also going to be gone. What am I to do to maintain my Krishna consciousness, because my husband was maintaining my Krishna consciousness? and now he's gone, and I'm too much attached, so it's minus the positive and plus the negative. I'm too much attached. What to do? And his answer was sadhu sangha. Then he said many things, and then he gave a breakdown of what sadhu sangha is. That's the section I just finished. Like, what's the characteristics of a sadhu? How do you identify one? When you find a sadhu, what do you do? What are the activities you do with the sadhu? When you do those activities with the sadhu, what's the result? And then he moved into it's devotional service, and then the fruits of devotional service in sequence. So that's his advice, his answer to her question at the beginning of the chapter. And then the scene changes, and she asks yet another question a few verses ago. She said, so this mystic process of bhakti yoga is what you're recommending. Are there different ways by which this mystic process of bhakti yoga can be performed? And she then says, I'm a lady, I'm not so intelligent, I can't understand these things so well, so please help me understand. And the verse before this one, Maitreya is narrating all this. Step back. Maitreya is narrating to Vidura, going back to earlier in the canto, so I'm not going to go that far back. But Maitreya is narrating all of this to Vidura. And Maitreya says, after hearing the statement of his mother Kapila, could understand her purpose, and he became compassionate towards her because of being born of her body. He, Kapila Dev, described the Sankhya system of philosophy. Now that's chapter 26. But the Sankhya system of philosophy, we discussed it a little bit. Anyway, the Sankhya system of philosophy leads to bhakti, just like Bhagavad Gita. We mentioned this yesterday evening. Chapter 2, the first part of chapter 2 is Sankhya. And then Krishna says, I've described Sankhya, O Arjuna, and now I'm going to describe Buddhi Yoga, how one can act with intelligence according to the proper understanding of what's what, because that's Sankhya. Categories of matter, categories of spirit, we belong to the category of spirit, even we're in the material atmosphere. Now, how to live your life so that you stay fixed in the understanding of who you are and don't get lost in who you aren't. Buddhi Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. The same thing is happening here. He, Kapila Dev, the title of this chapter is The Glories of Devotional Service. Here it's said he's going to describe Sankhya. But he means because it's the preliminary to the proper understanding of what bhakti is. You have to know, at least conceptually, that we belong to the category of spirit when you engage your senses with the object of the senses. Understand who you are, because there's material senses, sense objects. So then comes this verse. The senses, Rishika, and the master of the senses, Rishikesha. Bhakti is to engage the senses in the service of the master of the senses. So the way that he's introducing this is by saying twice in the verse that the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods. Symbolic representations. And that could mean different things. Symbolic representations could mean they don't really exist. It's just a symbol of something. Senses exist temporarily. So there's the demigods, and they're also temporary. So supposing there's the two categories of activity, three categories. One, complete disregard for Vedic injunctions, material activities. Senses engaged in simply sense gratification. Second, senses engaged in the service of the demigods that they're the symbolic representations of, according to the codes of the Vedas. Well, that's nice, but it's also on the material platform. Why? The Vedas are transcendental. It's the breathing of Lord Narayana, and so it's fully transcendental, recorded in the codes of the Vedas. So why is the breathing of Narayana instructing people? Because there's a massive portion, 90% portion of the Vedas is Vedic injunctions how to serve the demigods, to do something, to get something. Material activities, no regard for the Vedas. Vedic injunctions, do something to get something, material. The something that the demigods can give is something material. And the answer is, the Vedas are for everybody. And a big part of everybody is people want to do something to get something. Fruitive work. So there's fruitive work that can elevate one to a higher position of consciousness, at least a higher mode of nature. And with that higher mode of nature, a higher destination, because better than degradation is elevation. So there's ample instructions in Vedic codes how to use the senses for the service of the demigods that serve to elevation of consciousness, which means elevation in the modes of nature, to a higher, like an upgrade of sense enjoyment in the heavenly realm. Why, again? Because people want it. They want to enjoy. So it's to regulate so that people can enjoy in a Vedic way, and at least the potential, because ultimately then the third position is the mind is the manifestation of the Supreme Personality Godhead. The mind is the representative of the Supreme Personality Godhead. So both the mind and the senses, that's the next sentence. The mind's natural duty is to serve. Duty or inclination. But supposing you don't have a higher destination or inclination, then you're going to serve a lower. And then there's the higher. And then there's transcendental. So he is answering her question, just starting to respond to her question. What are the different ways of devotional service? I'll read. This is now text 29. The mystic yoga system, bhakti, as you have explained, aims at the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is meant for completely ending material existence. That's liberation. So what's being said in the purport for this morning is beyond liberation, or the perfectional stage of liberation is even when on this physical plane, using the senses to serve the master of the senses, that's the ultimate perfection of liberation. So back to her statement, text 29. this bhakti system is meant for completely ending material existence. Doesn't mean leaving your body and going back to Godhead. It means in this lifetime, within the present body, going beyond material existence, because devotional service is performed from that platform, beyond material existence platform. I mean, it's a little puzzling. It may sound self-serving, but it's a scriptural statement, so it's good to understand what that scriptural statement means. And what it means is, at least, supposing somebody's on the beginning stage, the platform that they're resting on, the bhakti platform, is from the platform of liberation. Or so, in a seed-like stage, there's this coming up is the Bhadra Purnima. You all know what Bhadra Purnima is? No? No? The previous Purnima was Shravan Purnima, that's when Balaram appeared. The next month, Purnima month, is Bhadra. And within ISKCON, there's this big celebration called Bhadra Purnima celebration, because there's a verse in the 12th canto. It's all over the place. Later, when I get to Rochester, I'm being asked to speak about it. So it's a whole presentation on Bhadra Purnima. Because 12:13 Bhagavatam says, one who makes a gift of Srimad Bhagavatam on Bhadra Purnima, on a golden throne, will achieve spiritual perfection. So all you have to do is give a Bhagavatam set to somebody, and temples will supply you with a golden throne. I mean, So, question, what does that mean? Or is that just a false glorification? Is it true? Just this and that. Make a gift of Srimad Bhagavatam on that particular day, back home, back to Godhead, or the highest perfection. It's one of the categories of offenses against the holy name, called artavad. Artavad, that particular offense means to consider the holy name of Krishna, the glories of the holy name of Krishna, to be exaggeration. Right? It's one of the 10 offenses. The Sanskrit is artavad. So is this just one of those? It's just an exaggerated, you do this, you get that. Isn't it exaggeration? Does it really happen? The Acharyas explain, not just specific to that verse, but it's in Nectar Devotion. In Nectar Devotion, which describes that offense against the holy name, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's not an exaggeration. It's indicating there's potency within that activity such that bhakti begins, supposing someone hasn't become a bhakta. There are some people that haven't yet begun. But they hear, and they're encouraged. They have some idea of the Bhagavatam. They have some idea because ISKCON devotees all over the world are promoting Srimad Bhagavatam for Bhadra Purnima. So they get on board. Sure. Get that benediction from the Bhagavatam. I'll purchase a set, or I'll gift a set, etc., etc. It means that their bhakti has begun. That's the explanation by Rupa Goswami, and there's much more to say about it. but their bhakti has begun. That is to say, the seed of bhakti is there in that act. Here's a simple one. Multiple choice question. A tulsi is A, a seed. B, the sprouting of the seed and a little shoot comes out of the soil. That's a tulsi. C, when tulsi produces 2 leaves. That's a tulsi. D, tulsi is when there's a whole plant and there's many leaves, and that's a tulsi. And then the next one is when there's flowers, tulsi manjaris that appear at the tops of the tulsi. That's a tulsi. Or finally, when those flowers produce more seeds, that's a tulsi. Or all of the above. It's all of the above. Similarly, even the beginning of bhakti is bhakti. The platform on which bhakti stands is the platform of liberation. It's right in Bhagavad Gita. And it's in the scriptures, many places. It's what's being taught here by Kapila Dev in chapter 25 about the glories of devotional service. So then she says, how many ways? Oh yes, so go back. Bhakti has the power of completely ending material existence. A, B, C, D, E, F, or in the most mature stage. It's only material existence ends when the most mature stage is manifest. You can leave the devotional service and then you're back in the material energy. But if you stay with devotional service with sincerity, etc., then it's on the platform of liberation. And there's potency therein to end material existence, even from the very get-go. Please let me know the nature of that yoga system, bhakti. How many ways are there by which one can understand in truth that sublime yoga? And so he's just beginning his answer to those questions. And the beginning, the next chapter is Samkhya, because Maitreya is saying he's going to explain Samkhya, but Samkhya requires understanding many things. Like the essence of Samkhya is to understand we're in the category of spirit. But then there's the other category also, the category of matter. And the censors are in the category of matter, the demigods are in the category of matter, and then there's the mind, which is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the mind is pursuing something. The tendency of the mind is to serve. Serve what? Something. And depending upon what the mind is attempting to be the servant of, that indicates the state of consciousness. It's not the essence of the state of consciousness, but it indicates the state of consciousness. So bhakti is where the mind is directed to the Supreme. And then the senses follow the lead of the mind. But supposing the mind doesn't go there, then it's a little hard to manage the senses. Because sometimes, and sometimes not. It's in the world of duality, so mixed devotional service. But devotional service is on the transcendental platform. So that's another chapter, another topic that comes. Since bhakti is pure, is it possible to be in the modes and still do bhakti? The answer is yes. Chapter 29. Devotional service that's influenced by this, that, and the other mode, and then there's devotional service that's free from the modes. That's the mature stage. And bhakti is meant to take one there. The very next verse is a nice verse. Next verse is text 33. In text 33, it's really short, and it's only 2 lines instead of 4. And the verse says, it's a good one to refer to. Bhakti, devotional service, dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort. Yay! Relief from the mind. Dissolve the covering, not the spiritual, but the material covering. Bhakti has that power of digestion. Without separate effort. Just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat. So Bhakti is a good program. And according to Bhagavad Gita, it's very rare. And to mature in the process of Bhakti is further rare. But the potency is there, just like the potency of a tulsi is in the seed. That's it for this morning. Bhagavatam is very nice. Very comprehensive, very encouraging, thought-provoking, consciousness awakening. It's spiritual sound. It's Krishna. So let's see if there's some discussion.
Association, so utilize it if possible.
When we come to verses that are very difficult to understand, for example, there's a section that Indra is fighting with a demon and using a foam to kill the demon. And it's very difficult to understand why is it mentioned in the Bhagavatam. In what state of mind, or like how should we regard, or a lot of people speak about the 5th canto, right? And you know, it's very outworldly, and so how do we, what is the approach? How do we read it and not think it's an exaggeration, or...
Nice question.
Yeah.
Best is to make reference to the previous acharyas who have access to understanding things that you and I don't have access to understand. I can't remember if it's, take those 2 examples. I can't remember if it's in relation to Indra using foam, but I just read there's an example where there's a battle, and the battle is going on and going on and going on. It was the reason that the opponent could not be defeated is they had some benediction. They can't be defeated this way or that way. And so the advice was given, use foam, because it's neither fire nor water or something like that. So foam, because then the battle could be won, or the enemy could be defeated. I'm not sure if it was in that section, but how does one know that? You know, from scripture, not like a someone creatively came up with something. So how do we know it's not an exaggeration, or it's not artavad? That's your question. Within the Bhagavatam, there's not artavad. At least in relation to the topics about the personality of Godhead, there's not artha, or exaggeration, inflated exaggeration. And there's statements to that, scriptural statements to that effect. One of the scriptural statements, because I was just going through this in relation to Bhadra Purnima, because the glorification in that verse from the 12th canto sounds like, really? It's just to pump people up so they give a Bhagavatam set on Bhadra Purnima. It's not really what happens. Come on. So, Sanatana Goswami in Brihat Bhagavatamrita, there's the verse and there's a commentary where it's explicitly stated. There is no exaggeration. In bhakti scriptures. Now, still that may require some careful understanding. Generally speaking, a Sanskrit rule, it's a Vyakarana rule, that direct meaning is to be accepted. Unless the exact meaning is checked or not possible. Not, by grammatical rule, not by our imagination or our measuring sticks. It's to be taken literally. So there's several articles written about, for example, about measurements, numbers that come in Srimad Bhagavatam with 5th canto. And the acharyas and devotees writing about this, making reference from acharyas, indicate that the depiction in the 5th canto, for example, of Bhumandala, the depiction in the 5th canto about Bhumandala is a picture of yogis that can perceive higher dimensional space that we can't perceive. So that's the lens through which we are to look at it, from the assistance of our acharyas. Supposing there isn't commentary from our acharyas that explain something, it's not exaggeration. We don't take it as exaggeration or artavad. It's, we may not understand it. Here's another one that just came across. Jiva Goswami explained, maybe you know this, in the 90th chapter of Canto 10, there's a description of how many personal attendants, like bodyguards, that Ugrasena had. You familiar with that? Canto 10, chapter 90. Some billion, which is more than the population of the Earth planet. And that's how many bodyguards he had, or personal attendants. So Jiva Goswami, in his commentary, writes, based upon, this is Sanskrit, but based upon the word that's used, it's not of this world, but it's of the other world. Jiva Goswami writes, Shukadeva Goswami had the capacity to perceive Ugrasena in Goloka Vrindavan, where there's no limit to the number of living entities. So Ugrasena, having so many personal attendants, is not just Ugrasena in Dwaraka on the earthly plane, but Ugrasena, and it's indicated how to understand that is right within the Sanskrit. So that's what his commentary explains. Now that's a puzzle. It sounds like an exaggeration. Come on. And so if I'm a worldly scholar or fellow, I'm going to say, look, the Bhagavatam is just like that. I don't take it literally. So how do you understand it? So back to your question. How are you or I or any reader of the Bhagavatam to understand where is there exaggeration? There are some examples of exaggeration. How many wives Chitraketu had? You know that section of the Bhagavatam? Huh? Yeah, but he had come on. So, according to, there's an example where there's no commentary, this is an answer to your question, where there's no commentary by our acharyas to give us a clue. It means that's a purposeful exaggeration. Without our acharyas, we're in la la land. We really aren't going to understand much of anything anyways. So with the guidance of Guru and Sadhu, the great acharyas, we can understand things that otherwise we couldn't understand. And so we come across a situation, there's no explanation from acharyas, and it's just not feasible. Then rare within the Bhagavatam, very rare. Now, other texts have exaggeration, but it's not the Bhagavatam. So then you can be peaceful. You may not understand, that's okay. By the way, as a detail, there's a bit of a, believe it or not, a controversy in the Temple of Vedic Planetarium and the model that's being used for the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, because it's a detail, but it may become some noise down the road. The person that has been given the authority, invested with the authority to make the model of the planetarium, has the view that the entire fifth canto, cosmology, must be taken literally. Ooh. There's some people that don't agree with that, but he's the authority. So, if it's not literally, then what is it, and on what basis should it be taken literally or not? So it's commentary of acharyas. Welcome to a controversy. It happens, and it's it's likely to become a little more amplified as time passes, so we get closer to the physical structure of the planetarium and what's it going to look like. But that's an over answer to your question. The simple answer is, within the Bhagavatam, generally speaking, there's no artavad. And to understand something that's puzzling, we go to the acharyas. And if the acharyas are silent on something, and it appears just to be not feasible, like the number of wives that Chitraketu had, then one can consider this is exaggeration. But that's rare, super rare. Is that okay?
Yes.
It's a delicate topic. It's a nice topic. Yeah.
Can I kind of follow up on that? Why is that consideration there that you could, you entertain the idea of an exaggeration just because it's not maybe feasible to your mind that can, where your senses can literally perceive 0% of reality? Why, isn't it okay for something to be like a mystery?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's more than okay. I mean, that's the title of Sariputa's book, Mysteries of the Sacred Universe. Or the topic last night, Mysteries of Sound. It's a mystery. And some things we can understand and some things we can't understand. And that's quite okay. Achintya, the very term achintya, is in scripture. So, rather than going too much with this, Jiva Goswami, the very beginning portion of Bhagavat Sandarbha, makes a definitive statement and then builds his case. The definitive statement is, without accepting the fact that the source of everything has unlimited and inconceivable potencies, Achintya Shakti, there's no question of understanding God. That means he's within our domain, so he's not God. So whatever that entity is not God. The entity, on the other hand, must be accepted, unlimited and inconceivable. So doesn't mean if I can't conceive of it, then it's fiction or exaggeration. But there are such things as exaggeration. So how do you discern? That's the question. And there are some things that are exaggeration. There's things that are not, but they're just inconceivable. People that want the devotees that want to very carefully, scrutinizingly study, using Prabhupada's phrase, we want to know this or that. That's the function of intelligence, to discern from one thing and from another thing. Is there such a thing as exaggeration? So that was it. But it's because I don't understand it doesn't mean therefore it's exaggeration. Is there such a thing as exaggeration? Yes. Is it in the Bhagavatam? Almost never. It's a long discussion.
Yeah.
It's an important discussion.
So to kind of like sum up like almost like a yes or no in regards to the Bhagavatam, should we, I mean,
Largely no.
yeah.
And are there cases? Chitraketu's wives, that's an example. And rather than going through, are there other examples? It's almost nil.
But even like Chitraketu's wife, I'm like, well, what's wrong with having millions of wives? He can handle the capacity of having millions of wives, and we can't. That's, to me, I don't know. That's just,
Okay, for you it's not a problem. For some people it's a problem. And so is it in the category of an exaggeration? Is it in the category it's just I can't conceive of it, or is it an exaggeration? Again, the rule is, because there's a long discussion on this topic, and generally speaking, the rule is you go to the acharyas if you can't understand it, because if it's simply inconceivable, they may say it's simply inconceivable. If they may say, for example, the number of bodyguards or the number of personal attendants of Ugrasena is referring to in the spiritual world, that's a nice explanation. And Shukadeva Goswami had the capacity to understand that and experience it and report it in the Bhagavatam. Anyway, so we go to the acharyas. And if the acharyas are silent, then it's just not realistic, or there's another word that's used. It's blocked. There's a Sanskrit rule, a grammatical Sanskrit rule. If it's blocked, then it may be. It may not be. Maybe, like you say, maybe he had the capacity for 1 million wives, no problem. He beat Krishna. Hare Krishna. Anything else? Yes?
What are the best internal beliefs, mood that we can adopt when we're interacting with maybe people who are very new to
Very new?
very new to the Vedic wisdom, maybe just starting to chant or
You don't go there. I'm responding, maybe I shouldn't cut you off, but just this morning I was listening to a morning walk conversation in Los Angeles. Somebody asked Prabhupada that question, and Prabhupada said, therefore just chant. Because people hold the conception, everyone has a conception, without exception, everyone has some conception in their mind. Bhagavad Gita, everyone has. So to get to the stage where a conception is different than my conception, the starting point is kirtan. And this is Prabhupada's explanation. And that through that kirtan, through that sound vibration, then cleansing of the mind begins. And then when cleansing of the mind begins, an alternative conception at least has some space. If it's a stormy day and there's no light of the sun other than it's daytime instead of nighttime, not much light is coming through. So to clear the sky and then some light can come through. So that's the clearing, Chitha Darpana Marjanam. And then the next is something that's very simple. What does Krishna do? You know, we're Sankhya. We're a spirit soul. And then you could dwell on that, going back and forth, yes, no, I don't believe, I have another conception, whatever it is. You go through it and go through it. And then, logically and even empirically. Here's a little example. So, if I don't have a conception of if I do have a conception of the soul, other than the covering of the soul, that's a starting point. Then you can go further. But if you don't have that, then not a good idea to go too much further into 6th canto, 5th canto, and things. So in this most recent Body, Mind, Spirit event in Gitanagari, someone, while I was there, sent me a little YouTube recording of a celebrity surgeon being interviewed, describing, rather than he had an out-of-body experience, he had a patient that had an out-of-body experience. And he was narrating, he was in disbelief. Without all the details. He had died. They pronounced him dead. But all the meters to show that there's heartbeat and etc. The hooking up to his body, they could see that there, everything was flat. And then they took off their gloves and they cleaning up the place, and they saw on the screen some little and then he came back into his body. And and all the doctors, surgeons, etc., were in disbelief. The nurses, because he was dead. Wasn't just during the surgery, but the same thing. Cardiac arrest means that the heart stops, and that's a common thing. But this wasn't even just cardiac arrest. Kaput. They hadn't pulled the plug on the machines. And then later, the doctor went to see the patient who was now, recovering from his surgery, and asked him, "What do you remember?" And he had incredible memory of all the things, including things like, while the surgery was going on, this is the detail in this video, the nurses had put Post-its on a screen that he could check later of messages that had come to him and that later, after the surgery, he had to respond to. So, just like a little secretarial service for the surgeon. And the person who was dead reported having seen those Post-its, which is not possible because he was dead. And it was, up in an elevated position, so that the standard thing of floating above his body, and reported what this nurse said, what that doctor said, what they did, their procedures, and so forth and so on, while he's dead. So what's that? There's a seat of consciousness that's other than the body. Explain it some other way, please. Is there such a thing? Yes. Is there evidence? Yes. Well, maybe there's another explanation. And then there's reports and reports and reports. So, that's a starting point. So back to your question. Start with ABC before you start to spell letters and write paragraphs. See if that person who has some other idea can accept ABC. They want to go to, something else. But, it's good. You don't have to be like twist their arm, but try to stay on point, on topic of who are we? Sankhya. And there's different windows, doors, chimneys, basements, and different ways of getting into that space where we're a spiritual entity. And one can know it from this descending method, and one can understand it by, it's confirmed, or it's not confirmed, it's supported by other methods. And it's a way to shake people out of, I've got my conception. And then to act that way, that's another thing. That's Buddha Yoga. The intelligence guiding the mind guiding the senses, and a life of devotion. So it's not the only thing that one can do, but that's a very simple thing. Some topic comes up, and you invite them, step back. Can I ask you a question? Who are you? Okay. You have something more?
No.
Okay. Anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Maharaj ki jai.